Okay, we will move forward with our agenda, which is number 3, and that's the motion to adopt the agenda. It's all right, you're allowed. We will be amending the agenda to add our public meeting item D14 2024-005 road allowance access to the west end of Beaver Road. We apologize, it wasn't on the original agenda, but in light of the lack, and this is the second time that it's come for public meeting, we're adding it to be number 11.1A for that report to be right after the other zoning bylaw amendment. And then it'll also be added to our bylaws to be 14.4 for Beaver Road. Okay. If the mover, Councillor Maybe, and seconder Deputy Mayor Fody are okay with that, be adopted as amended. Okay, any other questions, queries? Not. So the motion is moved by Councillor Maybe, seconded by Deputy Mayor Fody, that the agenda be adopted as amended. All those in favor? All those opposed? And it is carried. Next item is declaration of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof. Does anybody have an interest to declare? I think the two councillors in regards to, wait here. That's not on this agenda. The grants, it is on the agenda. So both Councillor Kelman and Councillor Jameson will be stepping out for the same reason they stepped out in committee of the whole, correct? Okay, perfect. Any other interests to declare? Okay, we'll move forward with number 5, which is in camera, and there is no in camera this evening, and move on to consent agenda, which is adoption and a receipt of minutes. Motion comes forward from Councillor Maybe, seconded by Deputy Mayor Fody, that the April 8th and May 6th, 2024 public meeting minutes be adopted as circulated, and that the April 8th, 2024 council meeting minutes and May 6th, 2024 committee of whole meeting minutes be adopted as circulated, and that the March 26th, 2024 committee of adjustment meeting minutes be received and filed. Any errors or omissions, questions on any of those minutes? I have no hands up, so I will call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? And it's carried. Next item is staff reports. And so we have a number of staff reports that are under this motion. If anybody wants to ask any further questions when I put the motion on the floor, I'm not going to separate anything out at this point. We do have a gallery full of young people and their loved ones waiting to see if we pass it, but I'll ask for any questions once I put the motion on the floor. Moved by Councillor Jameson and seconded by Deputy Mayor Fody that council approve the staff reports as recommended at the May 6, 2024 committee of the whole meeting. Are there any questions? Yes, so sorry. My apologies. Are there any questions on any of the staff reports before we call the question? Okay, well, that was an easy one. So all those in favor, please signify. All those opposed, carried. Okay, which means that we have the benefit of actually coming forward and asking the winners of the bursaries. So if you'll just bear with us for 2 seconds. So we have the winners for the bursary. Sorry, I'm just making sure I have everybody's names right. So I don't have you on my screen right at the moment. Thank you. Sorry. So we have 3 winners: Seth Morency, Claire Warren, and Sierra Walpott. So congratulations to the 3 winners. If you would please come forward and we'll take a picture with the winners and with the rest of council as well, please. you for having patience while we did our photos with all the winners of our youth bursary awards. So we'll move forward with information items. Now, these are, I'm going to put the motion on the floor, but we have the EA update. We have a presenter. Now, that was bang on. We had estimated 6:40. So our presenter is going to join us online. We have Susan from JL Richards. And then we'll go forward with the other items on underneath information items. So I'm going to put the motion on the floor and then we'll move through each of the items. So motion comes from Deputy Mayor Fody, seconded by Councillor Maybe, that the information items be received and filed. So the motion will remain on the floor until we get through the relative items. So I will go to Susan from JL Richards.
Thanks, everybody. Hello, everyone. My name is Susan Shi. I am the Senior Environmental Engineer with JL Richards, and I'm also the project manager for this very important undertaking for the Village of Lansdowne. So today I'm here to give you an update on the municipal class environmental assessment for a new treated water storage facility in the village. Next slide, please. There is an agenda for today's presentation, which has been included in the meeting package. So first of all, I will give you a bit of a project overview and the background in terms of the studies that has been completed prior to JL Richards getting engaged with the storage EA. And then we'll walk you through the class environmental assessment process, just so you understand kind of the process that we have to undertake to come up with the recommendations. And then we're going to walk you through each of the two phases that we undertook. First phase being the problem opportunity statement, the second phase being the alternative solutions with the recommendation. And then lastly, we'll talk about the next steps moving forward. So project overview. So JL Richards was originally engaged by the village back in 2022 to undertake a service area infrastructure assessment as well as the growth readiness study. So those are kind of the pre-phase of the class environmental assessment, looking at the various components of the water and wastewater infrastructure within the village. And from that study, it was found that the village's existing standpipe does not have adequate storage for the current population as well as the projected growth. Subsequent to that study, in September 2022, the township retained JL Richards through an RFP process to undertake the official Schedule B municipal class environmental assessment to evaluate the various different potable water storage solutions that will service the village for the next 25 years. In terms of the existing drinking water system, the map here shows you generally what the drinking water system looks like within the village boundary. So the drinking water system generally includes the two municipal groundwater wells next to the park there and behind the existing standpipe. Each of the wells are equipped with the filtration disinfection system, which are the treatment processes to get rid of the bacteria, the virus, and some of the contaminants in the drinking water before it gets just distributed to the customers. So the one municipal standpipe, obviously that's the key component of our study, and approximately 6 kilometers of water mains that distributes the water to the various end users. Through the study, we were able to identify that the existing service population within the village is approximately 550 people. And it is worth noting that the drinking water system is owned by the township. However, it's operated by the Ontario Clean Water Agency. This slide here shows you kind of a summary of the existing water supply and distribution system. I'm not going to go through line by line, but this is more or less just so you understand kind of the various elements of the water supply and distribution system. So the water taking does have a capacity allowance governed by the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks, and also that each of the wells have different depth and the similar pumping rate. And also it's worth noting that, there's UV and sodium hypo disinfection system in place to provide the treatment required. In terms of the existing standpipe, that's kind of the critical component of our study. We have laid out the general dimensions of the standpipe. And we've also documented the nominal volume as well as usable volume, which we'll get into a bit more detail and explaining the differences later on during the slide. Existing standpipe conditions. So these are kind of the key challenges or the key issues that we have flagged throughout our kind of the early stages of our study. The standpipe was recoated in 2019, and it was subsequently inspected at the end of the warranty period, I believe, in 2021. And it's worth noting that through that inspection, there wasn't any coating defects that was found on the exterior shell, which is great news. And there are some very minor areas of pinholes resting on the interior liner. And this is very typical for a standpipe that's coated, so nothing significant. And throughout that inspection, it was recommended to install a new manway hatch in terms of allowing access, and then subsequently allowing the mixer power supply to be able to be fed through that new hatch. It was also has been identified by the operations that there has been ice forming in the winter on the top layer of the standpipe, which has caused damage to the mixer's power supply. And this has been flagged, and the mixer has been replaced multiple times. However, there is a recommendation regarding using the new hatch to kind of bring the power through on the side of the standpipe instead of from the top. And more recently, sorry, go back for a second. Thank you. Most recently, in July 2023, there was a fire that just occurred just outside of the urban boundary on the farm to the west of the school. And the operations group has flagged that, that this fire has triggered the draining of the standpipe, which took a long time to recover. And the exact number of days was about 2 days, and the standpipe lost quite a bit of volume through that fire event. So this has been flagged as one of the main challenges with the existing standpipe is the deficiency to provide the fire protection as required. The municipal class environmental assessment. So this slide here just shows you the general kind of steps that needs to be undertaken under a municipal class environmental assessment process. And this is a provincially legislated process for any municipalities before they undertake the design work for any roads, water, and wastewater projects is to follow the 5-step process. And in our specific case, we're looking at water storage, which falls under, we call it Schedule B Class EA. And on the figure on the right-hand side shows you the 2 phases that our Schedule B Class EA has to be completed. So phase 1 being a problem opportunity statement, basically looking at the background information and trying to find out what the challenges are, and also looking at the future growth. And phase 2 being going through the various different alternative solutions and recommending the preferred option moving forward. In terms of project timelines, this Class EA was originally initiated in September 2022, and we've been undertaking the stakeholder and public consultations throughout the project. We did get some correspondence back from the various stakeholders and public at the onset of the project that we're considering as part of the recommendation. And then we went through the step-by-step process where we looked at the class environmental assessment phase 1 and phase 2, which I'll walk you through more in detail in the next few slides. And we've also completed the Housing Enabling Water System Fund application in April 2024 in support of this project. And moving forward, tonight I'm here to present the project update to council, and we're hoping to move forward with the recommendation and engage the public to gather their inputs in the spring this year. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through kind of the information that we gathered as well as the process that we followed coming up with the recommendations next. So class environmental assessment phase 1 problem opportunity statement. So one of the most critical items during the class environmental assessment is to identify the growth for the village. And we typically allot or put the different growth into the different timeframes where we call different buckets. For example, we looked at the short-term growth, which is within the 0 to 5 years. We also looked at the long-term growth, which is 5 to 25 years. So this way that it helps us organize ourselves in terms of looking at some of these realistic growth projections, as well as the infrastructure needs to support these growth. I'm not going to go through this one by one, but this is a map that was made during the kind of phase 1 report, documenting the various different residential development units that are expected to be developed, as well as the equivalent population. Again, population is extremely important as we need to carry that information into our water demand calculation later on. So overall, we're looking at about over 300 people growth. And it's also worth noting that we have allowed for certain units to be built under the Bill 23, which is Build Home Faster Act, and which is essentially allowing people to build secondary suites in their backyard without having to go through the formal approval process. So that has been accounted for, and there's a bit of a contingency that's being built into the projections. Again, the long-term residential growth, we've mapped out the various different areas. And as you can see that these numbers we have obtained directly from the planning department, working with your planning department to come up with these numbers. And we also have, as part of this exercise, to flag any potential future commercial, industrial, and institutional growth on top of the residential growth. And these are generally the areas that we have flagged. And we usually do it by land area, as the water demand does tie to the area available for development. Okay, so existing water storage requirements. We have to design a water storage facility in accordance with the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks design guidelines for drinking water systems. So this is a guideline calculation that we have to undertake to come up with the storage for existing as well as future. I'm going to draw your attention to the figure on the right-hand side first to kind of help explain the various different elements that this water storage provides to the village or the end users. So first of all, we call those the ABC calculation. So element A being the fire storage. The water storage reservoirs do have to provide the fire storage flow under the fire underwriter survey methods. And, there is a certain volume that's tied to it because once you turn on a fire hydrant, it needs to be kind of on for a certain amount of time. And there is a volume that's associated with fire protection. The second element is B, which is equalization storage. And this is the day-to-day balance of the peaks and the valleys, during your diurnal patterns. And the B element is there to kind of balance your daily demand variations. And then the last one is emergency storage, which is C. And this is kind of the last resort in case that your well is offline and we have to provide a certain volume to make sure that we can sustain the water supply to the rest of the village. So there is the ABC component of it. And then on the left-hand side, it's a table summarizing kind of the various design elements and how we came up with the total storage requirements. And the bottom line is that through this analysis, we've identified a deficit of over 233 cubic meters for the village under existing conditions. And sort of in parallel with that, we have also undertaken the water distribution system modeling, which is called WaterCAD modeling, looking at the various nodes in your system, even the hydrant and the water mains, the diameter of it, looking at the pressure, the flow, just to make sure that we meet the design guidelines provided by the ministry. And it's very important to say that the Lansdowne system generally operates in accordance with the pressure and fire flow recommendations by the ministry, and the system is pretty well designed for the existing conditions. So summarizing, again, there's a bit more information in here than what we had presented previously. During phase one, we have to identify all these various different areas of concerns. So the well pumping and treatment, like I mentioned previously, there are 2 wells that supply the water to the village. And there is a concern under emergency or shutdown operations of the standpipe. This would mean that the wells will have to pump continuously because you lose that A plus B plus C buffer in your system. And also that the existing standpipe provide a disinfection contact time, which is the contact time meaning that it's the amount of time the chlorine reacts with the bacteria, the virus to kill it, to make sure that it meets the safety standards. So by in the event that standpipe is down for maintenance or shut down, then there is a bit of a treatment and disinfection concern here. In terms of water distribution system, there is only one water main that currently connects the well and the standpipe to the entire system. So this is a single point of failure that we're trying to mitigate moving forward. And we would like, later on during recommendations, you'll see that we're providing some additional water main looping to make sure that in case one section of the water main fails, at least we have another way to deliver the water to the rest of the system. In terms of fire protection, like I mentioned previously, the storage facility does provide a critical role in fire protection. And it's worth noting that, we are looking at Ontario Building Code as well as the ministry guidelines. And it's promising to see that only 2% of the nodes are below this threshold. So most of the system is operating fairly well. However, it's worth noting the Frederick and Jesse Street are on the dead end, and you'll see later on during the recommendations that we are recommending looping those two water mains to provide increased flow and pressure for the rest of the system. And also that looping back into the fire event last year, there is a need to improve the level of service, particularly related to fire flow pressure and reliability throughout Lansdowne. In terms of groundwater quality, there isn't really a lot to flag, and we've noticed that there are some sodium exceedances in the groundwater. Again, this is just something that we have flagged, and this comes with the nature. It comes with the quality of the groundwater, and this sodium level doesn't necessarily challenge any of the operations because this isn't a parameter that's being regulated by the Ontario regulations. And also there was increased future demands that may cause the raw water quality issues because we are drawing more from the ground. And then there's increased hardness that comes with the groundwater. Again, all these will have to be looked at in the subsequent phases. In terms of the future storage, so what we did here is we applied the short and long-term growth, and then we adjusted it, applied the water demand rates to the future servicing population, as well as looking at the fire flow, equalization, emergency storage, and came up with this table flagging that as the development continues in the village, there will be significant water storage deficit moving into the long term. So this is the end of the phase one. This is the problem and opportunity statement that we generate as a result of the phase one work. So basically, it's read such that the drinking water system in the village of Lansdowne is facing problems such as water quality issues, fire flow constraints, and dead ends in the distribution network. The proposed new development will trigger an expansion to the existing treated water storage capacity as such that there is an opportunity to ensure the township has a solution that will address the existing and future constraints on the drinking water storage and the distribution system overall. So phase two, this is where we start looking at the various different alternatives, solutions to address the problems and come up with a recommendation. Through the phase two, we had to engage a natural heritage specialist or ecologist. So we retained Cambium to conduct the desktop natural heritage study, and this is a requirement by the ministry as part of all sorts of class environmental assessment work. Essentially, we have identified the 2 land parcels that are owned by the municipality that are feasible to construct a new water storage. So the one parcel being the municipal office site, and then the second parcel being in the park. And throughout this evaluation, the west parcel, which is in the park, presents no constraints in terms of natural heritage aspect because it is already a constructed park that has been disturbed. So there isn't really any concerns there from a natural environmental perspective. However, there are some concerns related to the municipal office site as it's close to the creek and there's some woodland nearby, and there is potential for habitat for species at risk. And also, as part of this, we reran the water model for the future conditions. So we applied all the growth areas for the short term and long term. And as you can see that those are the various different hatched areas now on the map. And we ran these water cap modeling, and the results have showed that the pressures and available fire flows generally decrease over time as is reasonable because we're having more users tapped into the system. And in the long term, nearly 20% of the nodes may not meet the minimum pressure during the peak hour demand. And on another note, that modeling showed the proposed upgrades will increase the available fire pressure and fire flows above the required minimum into the long term. These upgrades meaning it's the 2 red dotted lines. It's a little harder to see, but the first section being the continuation on Church Street, tapping into Jesse Street. It's that elbow there to provide kind of the to avoid a single connection from the stem pipe to the system. So we're doing that elbow there, as well as connecting Jesse Street to Frederick Street on the west end of the village here. So by doing this, we have found that it has significantly improved the fire flow and pressure in your system, and that was great results. And I want to also flag that there are usually challenges associated with the stamp pipe because it is the water column sitting on the ground. The system pressure does drive kind of the hydraulic, we call it the hydraulic grid line in the system, meaning the height of the water column in the stem pipe. It is we're very pleased to say that even with the future growth and the future flows we're applying to the system, the existing stem pipe is able to maintain the hydraulic grid line, which means that we don't have to raise the height of the stem pipe, which means that you can keep the stem pipe as is. So following that, we have come up with a kind of a list of different alternative solutions. And usually how we do this is that there are different elements that contribute to an alternative solution. So the three various aspects that we looked at is approach, location, and configuration. So approach meaning that the sub different options under approach, meaning do nothing, or decommission existing stem pipe, build a new storage, or maintain existing stem pipe and build new storage. And in terms of location, like I mentioned previously, it's the municipal office versus the park. And the configurations, I'm going to get into a bit more detail later on during the presentation about the 4 different storage configurations that we usually consider. So this is the various different options. So the first option being below grade reservoir and pumping station. So these tanks are usually buried and constructed of the concrete structures. And there's usually a pumping station that's attached to this because we have to pump it to the system pressure and to maintain the hydraulic grid line. And this option generally presents the highest capital cost because we are excavating down to rock or even blasting rock, depending on the site locations, and pouring concrete as a result. So this option generally is the highest capital cost overall. The second option that we looked at is the at-grade reservoir and pumping station. And the picture on the left-hand side there shows you generally what it looks like. These are the glass fused to steel tanks that sits at grade, so you don't have to do extensive excavation, and all the water column sits on top of the pad. However, there is a pumping requirement because this is not quite as tall as the stem pipe, and these are usually flatter shaped reservoirs. The next option is the composite elevated tank. You probably have seen these tanks everywhere driving along the 401. So these are essentially this one comes with the concrete pedestal at the bottom and a coated steel tank on the top. And this one generally has a fairly expensive capital cost associated with that as well. And and this tank configuration requires recoating every 10 years, which means that there is a bit of a shutdown maintenance time periods that needs to be considered. The last option we looked at is a stem pipe. So this is the same configuration as what you have. However, there are different materials available in terms of glass fused to steel versus the coated steel. So we went through initial screening process, trying to narrow kind of our focus here in terms of the various different solution categories that we looked at. And essentially what we have come up with is that we had to carry forward the do nothing option, as this is the baseline for evaluating all the options against. And because we don't have to increase the hydraulic grid line in our system, we have screened out the decommissioning of the existing stem pipe, considering that the stem pipe itself is in fairly good condition. And then we kept the maintaining the existing stem pipe and new storage approach here. In terms of location, we have screened out the municipal office site because of the natural heritage concerns. And in terms of the configurations, we've carried forward the first 2 options. Again, understanding that the elevated storage tank is fairly expensive, and it's a very similar concept to a stem pipe, and having 2 elevated storage within the same community of your size isn't really something that people usually do. So we had to screen out the last 2 options. This is a high-level summary of the evaluation matrix. So we would like to do these kind of evaluation process through a qualitative assessment process, meaning that different colors, assigning different colors in terms of preferred, less preferred, and least preferred. And we have come up, obviously, the servicing solutions is a result of combining the various different pre-screened options. Servicing solution number 1 being do nothing, servicing solution number 2 being maintaining existing stem pipe and build a below grade reservoir in the park, and then servicing solution number 3 being maintaining existing stem pipe and build a new at-grade reservoir also in the park. So through this evaluation process, we have determined that servicing solution number 3 is the preferred solution, meaning that we are looking at building a new at-grade reservoir and the booster pumping station in the park. So this slide here shows you a bit more details as to the recommended solution. The figure on the right-hand side shows you generally where the reservoir and the booster pumping station will be located, along with a new water main connection to the main line that goes out to the distribution system. And we would also like to flag it that this solution, we came up with this solution with the consideration of a phased approach. I think that's the critical recommendation that came out of this exercise was the phased approach element. For the agro reservoirs, what happens is that we can build and design the foundation of this reservoir to meet the ultimate storage volume requirement, because as you can see here that we're looking at almost doubling the capacity, and there are a lot of issues that comes with oversizing a storage reservoir. One of the most prominent issues is the water age, and as well the mixing and the winter conditions, the ice formations. So we don't want to build something that's overly big for your 25 years, but we also want to give you something that you can work with that will address the deficit currently, and then moving forward into the future, judging by the rate of the growth, that you can build additional layers onto this reservoir. So to kind of help you visualize how this is going to work is that this tank will be built with a rectangular shaped base, and then there are different rings, we call it different steel rings, that sits on top of each other. And what the supplier would do is they will build the rings for the current demand, phase one, in this case 1,700 cubic meter storage, which will meet your 10-year or midterm projections. And as you move forward with more development and realize that the storage is in a deficit or about to achieve the capacity, the contractor will come back in, raise the tank up, and then start building more rings at the bottom. So the tank itself will grow in height, and again with the design in mind that the foundations will accommodate the ultimate growth. So this is a bit more front loaded in terms of the foundation construction, however, with consideration for future expansion. And then the bottom line is that the opinion of probable cost that we came up with to do this project, so phase one, which will address your midterm growth, is $4.3 million. And this is with an accuracy of plus minus 30%. To keep that in mind, we're looking at a very high level. And then for the phase two, which is the long-term and ultimate condition, we need to add another $2.6 million to raise the tank wall up and to accommodate the additional volumes. So overall, the next steps, we are going to the public, hopefully in the next few weeks, running through the same presentation material with the public, and we'll collect and address the comments based on this public information center. The intent is to post these presentation materials online so people can take a read if they cannot come, and they can submit their questions after the fact. And then after the comment period is closed for the public, then we can move forward with finalizing the class environmental assessment reports, accounting for anything that might change our recommendations. Again, this is a public process, it needs to be open and transparent. Therefore, if anything that comes up during this consultation period that changes our design, then we are obligated to consider that. And following that, we'll publish it for another 30 days of public review period. And this is usually not only just for the public, but also the stakeholder agencies, for example, the Ministry of Environment, Conservation, Parks, and also Ministry of Multiculturalism and Citizenship will also provide comments, and as well as Conservation Authority. So there are a lot of stakeholder agencies that do these type of review. And then once that's passed, then the township can move forward with the design and construction of the storage reservoir. And that is the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much. Very comprehensive and full of information. So we've waited a long time for this to get to this stage, with certainly not because any of delays for you. I know that you guys have all been working hard on this. So we'll open the floor up for any comments or questions from members of council, if you have any at this time. Councillor Grau, go ahead.
Stand by. The general projections of population. So you're going on a per capita basis as per and not a residential basis. And I see that those numbers are very, I would say they appear to me to be very generous in the growth, which has a direct influence on the cubic meter requirement on your future water storage graph, or pardon me, chart. So what you've come up with in phase one, what you're calling phase one, is for a total of 1,700 cubic meters. Is that correct? A total?
That's correct.
Okay, so that total would put us over the midterm, and the midterm is a dart thrown at the dartboard for population at this time. The only long-term, as I understand it, would take into account the second phase of Lansdowne East. The first phase of Lansdowne East would not require 1,700 cubic meters. Is that correct?
Okay, let me go back a little bit here. So I'll answer your question one by one. So the first question is how we came up with the midterm. So there is a bit of a backstory to this. We actually met with the Ministry of Conservation and Parks, and we were in the process of synchronizing there is a bit of a discrepancy in terms of the permitted water capacity and the well treatment capacity. So it's about half of the treatment capacity right now for each of the wells. We've undertaken this consultation process with the ministry as well as the Conservation Authority, and the ministry has approved a permitted water limit of 1,000 cubic meters per day, which is more than your current permitted water, which is 772. And the rationale for picking that number is so then it allows the municipality to continue to grow beyond the short term. And that is a number that they're comfortable with based on the background studies that has been completed by the hydrogeologist. And we had to put in the midterm growth as a result because that is what's being allowed currently by the ministry. So that's the backstory on the midterm growth. And to go back to your question about the storage volumes and how we came up with these equivalent, I'm assuming you're asking about the equivalent population, the top row on that on the slide, 17?
That's correct. That it strikes me as I'm not quite sure where you've come up with those numbers.
Yes.
They seem very generous, to be blunt. And where I'm going with this is there something less than the 1,700 cubic meters that is possible?
Okay.
In other words, your midterm is a dartboard shot. So can you start with something smaller? Is that feasible? Is it not feasible? You talk about rings on this storage area. So we've kind of leapt forward to this midterm, which is a very uncertain thing, and it's going to cost somebody $4.5 million. So I just wonder if there's something short of the midterm. How's that?
Okay, so this is a two-part question. So first of all, I'll explain how we came up with the population, the numbers that we presented on the top row of that table. There is a difference in terms of the service population versus the equivalent population. There is a formula that we have to follow under the design guidelines because it's not everything is residential. There is institutional, commercial, and industrial. Especially for your long term, there is a huge projection for industrial and commercial developments. Therefore, we have to be able to translate the industrial commercial component back into a number that we can work with, which is residential units. So there is a complicated process where we have to undertake. And I appreciate that you flagged the difference in terms of the service population versus the equivalent population. So these numbers we've calculated based on the ministry design guidelines, and those aren't something that we can change. To answer the second part of your question about potentially building something that's sufficient for the short term versus the midterm, because it's uncertain right now as to what that looks like. There is an economy of scale here in terms of building a storage reservoir. There is a significant concrete work that needs to be undertaken, building the circular base, the booster stations. So there is a phasing element to all of it. And I think working with your staff, trying to figure out what is the most reasonable number to hit, and understanding that, the history of building permits being issued and at the pace that these developments are coming in, we want to give you something a bit more than just the short term, because these projects take multiple years. Like, as you can see that the Class EA process already took 2 years, right? And then design construction is going to take another 1.5 to 2 years to complete. So we don't want you to be building this and then, realize at the end of a construction period that you'll be out of storage again. So we have to be a bit longer term planning aspect, like consider, what is a reasonable number. But again, this is something that we came up with that lines up with the ministry approval at this current time that's reasonable, and that's going to extend beyond your short term.
So also the corollary of that would be that if we build to the midterm, these 1,700 cubic meters, it may take us well into the future if the projected growth does not project. Right?
That's correct.
That could take us to 2050 and so on. So we're really, if I'm reading between the lines here, you're under certain constraints from the ministry regarding industrial and how it translates and gets weighed. And by spending $4.5 million, we could put ourselves well into this century, frankly. We could put it to 2040. There's no rule that says we couldn't. Is that correct?
Yes,
If we-
again, it
if-
depends on the growth, like how many
Right.
building permits gets issued, right? That's one of the challenges is with small municipalities. This is a significant capital investment.
Yeah.
And you don't want to invest too much now because you'll be faced with replacement and maintenance later on. So we're trying to
Okay.
do something that's a bit more reasonable, considering the growth rate.
Okay, and just, I guess I don't want to dominate here, but finally, the economy of scale, you're telling us the economy of scale suggests strongly that we build to 1,700 cubic meters for the economy of scale. Is that correct?
There is an element there. Yes.
Thanks. I'll cede the rest of my time, as they say. Thanks.
I have Councillor Kelman. Did you have your hand up? Okay, so Councillor Kelman, Councillor Maybe, and then Deputy Mayor Fody.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. I had a question about when we build the new reservoir, it's going to require a backup power supply for the pumping station. Do we have, maybe the Director of Operations could answer this as well. We have a generator for what we already have, I'm assuming, for a backup power supply. And could we use that for this as well, or would we have to build another backup power supply?
I would suggest that we build a separate power supply because these backup powers are usually built for different purposes. The backup power for the wells are for well pumping and treatment. So that's a separate function as the booster pumping here, because this is your kind of your main line that feeds the rest of the system, and you have to be fail safe in case of a power outage. And this is something we usually recommend, especially with the drinking water system, is to have the standby power available for all these critical elements.
Thank you.
I have Councillor Maybe. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you. So during the discussion here, can the tank, its size is 1,700 cubic meters, does it have to be filled to that level at this point, or can it be gradually increased as the population does? Number one question.
Yes, you're absolutely right. You don't have to fill it all the way to the top, and you are building the volume to satisfy kind of a projection. So it can be slowly filled up as the growth comes in.
Yes, which actually helps the aging of the water, because there's only a certain amount of time that you can store the water before it's got to be changed over. And so next question is, as these tanks have ice in them and mechanical devices in the standpipe that's already there has had issues and has had some mechanical deficiencies, has there ever been a bubbler system put into one of these tanks that actually goes around the whole inside and then mixes it that way, but also keeps the ice off in the wintertime?
There are different types of systems available for mixing. Generally, there are two types, one called active mixing, another one is called passive mixing. Passive mixing is different. So active mixing, as you can imagine, uses the electrical power, right? So it's a turbine or it's a mixer of some sort that spins inside that promotes the circulation, versus the passive mixing system depends on the filling and draining of the tank. So it's usually like a like a tight flex duckbill valve that we build on the side of the tanks. And then the configuration of it will have to be designed through the later on assignments. But essentially the water shoots in as the tank gets filled, and then that promotes the kind of the circulation within the tank itself. There are pros and cons with each, and at the Class EA stage, we're not quite recommending a type of mixer just yet because it needs to be
No.
site specific. So
Yeah.
we're silent on the type of mixer during the Class EA.
Yes. Well, I guess my question there was whether there is a bubbler system, because as we know, our ferries in Kingston actually use a bubbler system to keep the water or the ice from freezing over for it to move. And I didn't know whether there was one for this type of system yet in place, but as an option. Another question that I have, once I find it here on my notes, unfortunately, the connection between Frederick and
Jesse?
Jesse, thank you. And which is on Ivan Street. Is there a reason why that Ivan Street connection doesn't go on over to King Street? Because if you look at Jesse, Frederick, and King, they all dead end, and the King Street is even further out toward the school.
Yep, that's a very good question. We actually had conversations with the director of operations in that regard. And the reason why we're only recommending connecting the Evans Street between Frederick and Jesse Street is because by doing that water main connection, it will meet the ministry and the building code requirements. However, it doesn't stop the municipality to continue extending that water main down towards the school, because that will further improve the fire protection as well as the flow throughout the system. Again, from a Class EA standpoint, we have a level of service that we need to meet, and we don't necessarily want to over recommend what's not necessary. But again, it's up to the municipality to potentially extend it even further south to connect to King Street.
Yeah, which is my kind of thought there, because again, it is a dead end and it does have that capability of the fire service requiring more water, and it could benefit their needs in the future. Let's see. And that was that one.
I have Director Holiday would
sorry.
like to get in.
Thank you. Just to follow up on Susan's comment. So when we looked at that, because that was my assumption that we were going to continue the main down to King Street. And when Susan showed me the water modeling, we do meet our fire flow requirements at the furthest west extent by the school without having that additional section of main. So that's a capital investment that would have to be made, but we're still meeting our requirements without it. But there are some developable lands south of that location that, you know, in future should additional flow be required, that it could be something that comes along with that development.
So a follow-up, please. My secondary is it's cheaper now than then for that one.
It could be something that that would be required as the development
Okay.
comes online.
Not a problem.
That might be the responsibility of the developer to do that.
But there's no development between those two from Frederick to King. It's just a road allowance at this point.
That's correct, but we do have the water
Below the
model
hill.
now.
Yeah.
That says, you know, we'll hit a certain flow, and as more developments come online,
Yes,
it'll show that the water modeling will decline,
yes.
and that would be a requirement for them to achieve that.
Okay, the townhouses that are proposed on the Jerry Park area above Jesse Street to the north, would this flow still meet that demand if those were built?
Madam Planner, so there's no proposed townhomes, though that was just a rendering. It was, we own the property, but there's no development slated to happen, or we haven't gone out for an RFP at this point.
That's correct. There's no status of that.
So it was just suggested maybe in the future.
Just so I know, back in the early years of me sitting at this table, that was strongly suggested to have happened. So that's why I bring it up now, is that it was a strong candidate.
Go ahead.
What I can add is that the elbow tying in Church
Mhm.
Street to
Yep.
Jesse Street will alleviate a lot of the flow concerns that we have along Jesse Street.
Okay, thank you. And then another follow-up question. In this study, does it actually show, because we're bringing more water and there's more flow, are the sewage pipes also needing an upgrade anywhere?
Director?
Thank you, through your worship. So the purpose of this study, we're taking a staged approach to looking at the systems here in Lansdowne. Currently, we're looking at the water requirements because we have to figure out, what's coming into the system. And then we have budgeted as well for the wastewater EA. So that would be the next stage that we would undertake to see, now that we have established what the intake is, we can then design for what the output needs to be.
Just a question in my mind. I gotta ask it, right?
Absolutely.
And one other thing I found on Schedule B, page 31, it says town and not township. Those little details,
It actually should say village,
Yeah.
not town.
yeah. So there
We'll
was that.
correct that.
Okay. I believe that's all my questions at the moment. Thanks.
Okay, I have Deputy Mayor Fode. Go ahead.
Excuse me. Thank you, Your Worship, through you, Susan, if I may call you such. With regards again to the 1,700 cubic meter storage, we currently are given permission here to use up to 1,000 cubic meters right now. On the 1,700 cubic, is that including the threshold, or is that what we're allowed to actually use?
So the 1,700 is in addition to your current standpipe capacity. Is
Okay.
that your question? I just want to make sure. I
Basically,
understand.
yes.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
it's in
we-
addition. It's in
It's
addition
an
to your
addition.
standpipe.
Okay, thank you. And with regard to the storage tank, if you will, what are the dimensions of that? Like circumference and height?
Yep. So it is actually, unfortunately, I don't have it here, but I do have it in the phase two report. And if you can just give me a minute, I'm gonna go find a dimension for you. So the diameter is about 17.2 meters. And then for phase one, we're looking at just under 8 meters high. And then for phase two, which is your long term, we're looking at potentially double the height of that tank.
Okay. My next question, the phase two with that 2.6 million at today's dollars, that's only if it was included on the initial build, would it not?
Yeah, so all the from a Class EA stage, all we can do at this point is to use the current day's value, which is $2024.
Right. Because to hypothetically take that tank apart 15, 20 years down the road, decommission it from the ground, if you will, jack it up and put in a couple of more rings, I'm sure it'd be a lot different dollar value than the initial cost of putting it in. Not that we need it, of course, at this point. I think that was it. Other questions have been answered by other questions asked. Thank you.
Any further questions? I see no other hands up. So Susan, thank you so much for your excellent presentation. Obviously, as part of your go forward basis will be public consultation, and we look forward to attending those meetings and hearing what the public has to say. But just also, I want to bookend this by saying that our HUSIF application went into the Ministry of Infrastructure on April 19th, and the ask was for 4.2 million, was it not? Or 3? Sorry, I'm getting
It's the
my
phase
numbers.
one. It's 4.3 million as estimated. Yeah.
Right. So we have asked the ministry for the full amount for that. That was the funding that went from 200 million up to 853 million, what have you. And we consistently and persistently remind our member of provincial parliament that we have put that in. So, so thank you very much for your hard work to date, and we look forward to getting more information as this project progresses.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Okay, so we'll move forward. Like I said, the motion is on the floor. We don't have to go, I'm not looking for comments on every single one of these necessarily. Obviously, there's a lot of information that was part of this agenda package. So because there are so many things, I would imagine I will go through them individually. However, if there's anything that we need to discuss or decide something different on, we will have to pull it from this motion. So the next item is the surplus fleet sales. Does anybody have questions? Or sorry, I apologize. I flipped the page. Next one is Cataraqui Source Protection Committee, discontinuation of private well testing program and closure of Kingston Public Health. And the two subsequent letters from Elizabethtown Kitley and Loyalist are about the same items. So maybe if we could group our comments in regards to this. Go ahead, Councillor Maybe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you. Some of you may know that with my work, I look after many buildings that the Ontario government has. 9 of them being occupied by many ministries within the Ontario government. Public Health Lab is one of them. So I'm in the building very often. Seeing this building close or for the government to move out of this water testing, I think is a big mistake. From May until October, they will do at least 300 daily water samples testing. During the non-peak time, it's about 120 daily. And with that, they are doing all kinds of tests, even for our own township, in our swimming areas, our residences, and all the real estates really have to do this. To go out to a private entity to have the same water testing done, which is for E. coli and cholera, or I think coliform, sorry, I can't read my own writing. Not that that's anything new, is $150 to $200 each. So it's a large portion. And again, we don't have to say Walkerton too loud to know that that is the reason for some of this testing being done. This particular facility also looks after monkeypox, measles, and was the second COVID testing site in Ontario. So it was very busy and ran 24 hours a day during that peak period. This building is growing immensely. Having been a person who goes through it on a regular basis, as I have said, it is amazing to see all the different testing that they are doing in all the different rooms on all kinds of blood pathogens and such. This particular building, if it closes, the second one that's in line to close is also Peterborough. And that, and in that, Hamilton, Kingston, Orillia, Peterborough, Sault Ste. Marie, and Timmins. So the next closest to us would be Ottawa. Water samples can only be 48 hours old and must be cool. Even the health lab says anything that comes from Cornwall sometimes has to be redone because it's past its time, or it's too hot, or has frozen. So it is important that we have something closer to us and open to the public to continue to ensure the safety of all our residents, not only in our own township, but all the surrounding ones. So this is something I think we really need to jump on and definitely make note that we need to keep our public health labs open all around, actually all of them, so that we can ensure our safe drinking water, as we just talked about, our Lansdowne well and tanks. So that's my spiel. Thank you.
Further comments in regards to the water testing? Go ahead, Councillor Conlon.
Thank you, Your Worship, and for you, I agree with Councillor Maybe, and I think it's very important in a municipality such as ours, where outside of Lansdowne, almost everyone is on a well. I think if people have to pay for their water to be tested, they won't get it tested. And everyone should get their water tested, but particularly people who have health concerns, have new babies, if they're elderly. And I just feel like we need to support Elizabethtown Kitley's letter, and on behalf of our residents, that we should be opposed to ending that free service.
So there is a suggestion that maybe we could make our own type of letter that would be similar, but we can accept these items and then have a subsequent motion come forward, I think, to put them. Oh, right. Okay. So I'll leave that as just a marker for now because I'd rather do one amendment than many. So we'll pull the Elizabethtown Kitley one as, okay, go ahead, Councillor Grow.
I'll just point out that 9.2, which isn't actually opening on my screen here, but that is our source protection group within Cataraqui, and they have some data on how many wells and so on. And let alone Elizabethtown, Kitley, and Loyalist and so on, that source protection group is mandated and the government, and that would be the one to be supporting and be cognizant about, to be on, in my opinion.
Okay.
Okay,
So-
I just can't open up the,
So
Yeah,
what I
but-
think is being proposed is that we would pull one of these and have our own letter, which we could reference the Cataraqui. We could reference all three of them in our letter. Okay. Any other comments in regards to any of the source water protection, drinking water testing? If not, I'll move on to surplus fleet sales. Anything weird and wonderful? I've got no hands up, so that's great. So we'll move on to introduction of Fire Pro record management system for fire services. Any questions about that? It's fairly self-explanatory, helping us get our notes in order in a faster fashion on site using technology. United Counties of Leeds and Grenville Business Survey results. Go ahead, Councillor Jameson.
I was interested to read the comments respecting what some businesses perceive as a heavy-handedness. In townships, it was plural townships. So I'm assuming that those comments were polled based on the aggregate number of submissions and not just the one specific to TLTI. And what occurred to me reading those less than joyous comments was that the challenge should be put on the table to the county as well as probably here and all the other individual municipalities to make sure that businesses, particularly in the construction business, understand that we do not invent the building code. We're not making it up as we go. And the Planning Act apparently is a provincial matter too. So that I would say that in terms of moving forward, we should probably, in my view, recommend to the county that they undertake some communications with the business community to help them understand how the system works from the top down and not the bottom up. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments in regards to that survey? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Foley.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. I was pleased when I read this, that the response from agriculture, I know it's a voluntary survey, but a lot of people, quite frankly, miss the point on the business aspect and the sheer dollar value of agriculture in Leeds Grenville and for every other township, I suppose, for the greater part of Ontario and Canada for that matter. But a lot of farms aren't referred to as a business. They're referred to as a farm. Well, a lot of these mailbox location farms in our township exceed $1 million a year in gross revenue. Some of them are far larger than that. And I think the general public is just totally oblivious to these numbers. And so it pleased me that the agriculture community took the time out to fill the surveys, which I must say was pleasing to see. And I think they need to stay more attuned to that and involve themselves in these type of surveys so they don't get left behind. Thank you.
Any other comments in regards to the business survey result? We'll move on to 9.8 and 9.9 in regards to Integrity Commissioner report in regards to a complaint and then the annual Commissioner report. Is there any comments or questions? Go ahead, Councillor Jameson.
I have a question respecting the cost. In 2023, I'd be curious to know, for the public record, the actual cost of the various integrity reports that had to be generated, and what is the cost year to date, if that's possible to have from staff. Thank you.
Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Through your worship. So for 2023, the fees were $4,548.25. And to date for 2024 is $5,044.25. And I would also like to note that when it comes to conflict of interest and code of conduct matters, these fees also include any opinions from council members as well.
Go ahead, follow up.
Well, my comment is that when we look at the reports that generally had to be pursued, they were, for the most part, lacking merit, and or so basically small change technical, that it's important that residents understand that the frivolous use of the integrity commissioner opportunity is costing us all money that we don't need to spend. Now, in the context of a $15 million budget, that's probably not going to break us, but it does speak to the challenge of the misuse of this. And I think it would be interesting to see after these years where we have not had to, or the complainant has not had to be identified or identify themselves, whether we should be pursuing this with the province to require that the complainant be identified from the get-go. It just doesn't seem very acceptable that it's kind of free range. And I'm not criticizing the integrity commissioner. I appreciate that we have a very highly skilled individual in the role, but I think this is crazy to have to put up with this kind of stuff. Thank you.
Further comments in regards to the 9.8 and 9.9? Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Fody.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. Just the letter dated Cunningham Swan, April 11th, on page 2. Complaint received December 24th, 2024. I assume that's just a typo. It should be 2023. I doubt they got the letter from this coming December just yet.
Oh, yeah.
And I agree with Councillor Jameson. These frivolous, a point made was that the law firm reached out to the complainant to trying to find some common ground, and they were denied. In other words, just keep spending money and carry on. And I agree with Councillor Jameson. It's it's almost like a piñata. Just keep swinging until you strike something. And I think our track record here since 2018 with this current sitting council, including Councillor Kelman, speaks for itself. We monitor ourselves and hold ourselves to a little higher standard than has been achieved in the past, and I'll leave it at that. And it would be nice if the provincial government could find some common ground to do just as Councillor Jameson had said, find some different wording. And they're not the only organization, might I add, that do that. The SPCA does the same thing. You complain about livestock or any type of thing along that line, and they're all over the farm with complete immunity as to who made the complaint. So I agree there needs to be a little bit of house cleaning. Thank you.
Any further comments in regards to 9.8 and 9.9? Seeing no other hands up, we'll move forward to 9.10, Municipal Property Assessment Corporation, their annual report. Okay, we'll move on to 9.11, which is Cataraqui Region Conservation Authority audited financial statements for 2023. No hands up. The next items from 9.12, 9.13, 9.14, and 9.15 are letters from other municipalities. Is there any item on here that anybody wishes to speak to? Go ahead, Councillor Jameson.
Comment on the 9.12, 9.13. We too have had our infrastructure funding reduced. And I think once again, it sort of connects to the water testing and a few other things. Suddenly, rural Ontario and Eastern Ontario in particular don't seem to be on anybody's radar in Toronto, lovely place that it is. And this is another reflection of that. There seems to be money to take over the Gardner Expressway or build roads way up in Vaughan, but there doesn't seem to be enough money for our bridges and culverts. And I think that's something that we need to address with other municipalities, perhaps through the county, in some more assertive way than we tend to do around here. And that's my point of view on that. Thank you.
Any other comments in regards to those pieces of correspondence? Go ahead, Councillor Kelman.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. Regarding 9.15, I just wondered if we'd ever been approached as a municipality about putting up wind turbines and if we would need to declare ourselves an unwilling host, or if that's something that is not really suitable for this municipality, because I don't know.
Madam Planner, you have anything to add to that?
I don't have anything to add to that. I haven't been approached, but it doesn't mean it couldn't happen. I don't know if we're in a high potential wind area.
Mhm. So I guess until we would be approached and presented with specifics in regards to what that project would look like, we really have no context. But good question. Okay, so we've exhausted the information items. We'll go back. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, this is an old hobby horse of mine. I'm going to raise it. Smiths Falls wants everybody to endorse the idea. And yeah, as a person that lived on the Via train for close to 20 years running Toronto to Ottawa, when that high frequency train or whatever they're calling it runs Toronto, Peterborough, Smiths Falls, Ottawa, Montreal, and Quebec City, you are going to see a very major decline in the traffic on the Lake River route that is really beyond Cobourg, because Cobourg is probably going to end up in the GO system as it is now a bedroom community of Toronto. So the reason I think, and I've written several people around here about this over the last 7 or 8 years when they first started to discuss it, I think this is not good for economic development everywhere from Trenton all the way through to Cornwall, and that everybody along this corridor should be sitting down with the federal government and making sure that we don't suddenly be left with, you know, maybe a passenger car tucked on the back of a freight car and a CN train, kind of like 100 years ago. I think that's completely possible because the volume of traffic that we see going to Kingston on the way to Montreal and Ottawa really allows us to have the train service we have now. So I raise it, and probably to deaf ears, but I think that the 15, 20-year outlook without this service being as robust as it is now will be something we will come to regret as a community. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
I don't think it falls on deaf ears because maybe some of us haven't thought about it to that extent. And bringing up your opinion about it is certainly valid and helpful because it gives us the opportunity to look at it and go, never thought of it that way. So I appreciate it anyways. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Fody.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. Councillor Jameson, on that same vein, I reached out to the town of Smith Falls today to see the most updated routing for this. And it really hasn't changed. It basically follows Highway 7 to make it simple. And then when it gets over toward Ottawa, there's two options. It'll swing up to Stittsville through Ottawa, Orleans and such, and then drop back down. Or it'll just run, Highway 43 below Highway 417 and such, cut through the north side of Montreal on through the Trois-Rivières and such. But I know there's enough people, not a lot maybe, but enough people use the Gananoque rail station that it's still a viable stop, which is something to be said. And perhaps we should rattle the chain, so to speak, and make the province know, or at least the rail lines know, that we're interested in what they have to offer. The reason I reached out to the town of Smith Falls, I didn't know that maybe there was an option to run across to Brockville and use the north line to Smith Falls and then carry on, but that's not currently what is being proposed. Thank you.
Okay, so based on that, if we pull 9.2 as the main, from information items to bring forward a motion to send our own letter in support. I say 9.2 because it's probably the most comprehensive out of the 3 points, with details that we can beef up a letter in support, to the minister. So can I have a mover, or sorry, I need an amendment to remove 9.2 from, the information items to be discussed, to have a letter. Okay, so maybe. And a seconder for that amendment, Kelman. To have a letter in support for 9.2. Or that's a separate motion to pull. Okay, so this amendment is just to pull 9.2 for further discussion. Okay. So I'm going to call the question on the amendment, which is to pull 9.2 for further discussion, moved by Counselor Maybe, seconded by Counselor Kelman. Kelman. All those in favor of the amendment? All those opposed? And it's carried. So the amended motion would be that the information items be received and filed other than 9.2 to pull for further discussion. All those in favor of the amended motion? All those opposed, and it's carried. Okay, so since we've pulled that, the clerk has written up, and I will need a mover and a seconder. And that council provide a letter of support to item 9.2 on the May 13th, 2024 council agenda. So the clerk and I would work on drafting that, to get that out. Councillor Maybe will move, Councillor Kelman will second. Okay, any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? And it's carried. Okay. So, we've been at this, it is 10 to 8. Is everybody good for a couple more motions before we take a quick break? I'll try to move through here. So action required items, we have 1.1, which is supplementary report for application for zoning bylaw amendment 2134 Blue Mountain Road, D14 2024-002. Motion comes forward from Deputy Mayor Fody, seconded by Councillor Maybe, that council approve the zoning bylaw amendment as attached to Planning and Development 2024-021 as Exhibit C to amend the existing site-specific rural special exception 49 RU-49 zone to increase the maximum permitted setback from Blue Mountain Road for any structure on the property from 70 meters to 110 meters, and permit day use of temporary travel trailer prior to receiving a building permit for a primary dwelling for a period of up to 2 years, and further to rezone a portion of the subject lands to include a holding zone classification to protect an identified significant wildlife habitat feature. Discussion on this motion. Okay, I will call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? And it is carried. Next, we have 11.1A, and the motion reads that council approves zoning bylaw amendment attached to Planning and Development Report number 2024-019 as Exhibit D to amend the existing rural RU zone that applies to the lands to a rural special exception RU-56 zone in zoning bylaw number 07-079 as amended to permit future residential development on a property without frontage on and direct access to an improved street. So I need a mover and a seconder for that. I have Deputy Mayor Fody and Councillor Lackey. Discussion on this motion, just for those watching, this was part of our planning meeting prior to this council meeting. It was also on a previous meeting in the fall. There were no objections, and we had added it to our agenda for this evening to move the process along. Any further comments or questions? I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? And we're carried. Okay, so we've got 11.1 and 11.1A done. So the next item is 2023 Building Revenue Expense and Reserve Fund Report Recommendation. And that comes forward from Councillor Jameson, seconded by Councillor Maybe, that council receive the annual building revenue and expense report as information and it be posted publicly on the TLTI website, and that council approve the transfer of $110,895.39 into the Building Department Reserve Fund. Discussion on the motion. I have Councillor Lackey, I have Councillor Maybe, and Councillor Grell, did you have your hand up?
No, I'm just looking over what I thought was a discrepancy between the, on the agenda here,
So it's 11.2 on the agenda.
Yeah, we've got 11.1, 11.1A. And then on the printed sheet here, I'm not showing 11.2 on my computer is showing the Blue Mountain Road. And on the printed, it's showing the building revenue.
I'm not sure where you're looking at it online.
Online, the meeting online showing that's the we skipped over something.
Oh, so it was, so the interesting thing was we just reversed the order of them is what we've done. No, on the printed one, it wasn't on there at all. It's
Correct.
it's on the digital one. That's why you're seeing.
So
the
as I was flipping back, so we've covered them all.
We have, thank you for catching that. So we are on the online agenda, we are on 11.3, 2023 building reserve expense. That is the motion that we just read. So, sorry, I have Maybe, Lackey, and was there someone else? No, okay, so go ahead, Councillor Maybe, and then Councillor Lackey. Oh, go ahead, Councillor Lackey. My apologies.
It's all right. Through you, your worship, I'm wondering, with the reserve fund, we went through this. I feel it's the same scenario as the library. How big do we allow the reserve fund and what is it primarily there for? This is something, this again is taxpayer dollars. I know it's the building department standalone and it comes from permits and what have you, but at what point does that reserve fund
Trigger.
yeah, when do we cap that and you know, that money could potentially be a decrease in taxes.
I'll let
You
the
know,
planner
or go to a different
line item.
budget, right?
Go ahead, Madam Planner.
Thank you through you. So that money could not go into another budget. That money is strictly building permit funds. It's a building reserve fund. It can't be used for anything else, any other departments. So when you look at what our total expenditures were for 2023, they were $763,892. With the closing balance of the reserve fund, I'm sorry, I'm just opening it up. I believe when you look at the statement of continuity, the final closing is 390,481 with the recommended deposit into it. So the intent of the building department reserve fund is to be there as a reserve fund to offset or to cover the cost of the operation of the department. So when you look at the total closing balance for 2023 at 390,000, that's half a year's operating expenses. So the purpose of the reserve fund is to be there to help offset the operating expenses of the building department if we have a down year, if there's a significant capital expenditure that we need to put out, say we needed to replace another vehicle or we needed to get another vehicle or training or legal costs or insurance. So it's there to help with the operations of the department and it's going to ebb and flow. We've had a few good years, but there may be a year coming up where things are slower, where we need to draw on the reserve fund. Last year we had a surplus, but the previous year we did have to draw on the reserve fund. So that's the purpose of the reserve fund. It's not legislated exactly how much you're allowed to have in the reserve fund, but typically the government allows for more than 1 year's of operating expenses within that. So we're certainly not at the top end of where the reserve fund could be.
And just to bookend what Councillor Lackey has asked about the reserve fund, I believe we have an expenditure in the 2024 budget for the the systems for the software, which was 250,000.
No, it's, I believe it's 89.
Oh, sorry. 250 was citywide
Yeah.
in general. My
But
apologies.
in addition to that, there's also the new vehicle that for the building department that was obtained. It was just received last week, so that will be coming out of the reserve fund as well. So there are other expenses that will be coming out of there. So I would anticipate that we are likely to see a draw on the reserve fund closing out 2024.
Okay. Counselor Lackey, do you want to ask any other questions? Nope. Okay, Counselor, maybe go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you. Basically, my question was the same as Councillor Lackey. And I did see that we have had an increase because of our newly formed septic tank additions to our whole process, so that the total number is up, even though our building and that type of thing is actually a little down, and the septic has actually brought it up. We loaded that one. Thank you.
Any further comments or questions in regards to the item regarding revenue expense and reserve fund report? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? And it is carried. I think we'll take a 10-minute break for bio break and then return back. Actually, I'm going to give you 9 minutes. So 8:10 we'll return. Thank you. We're just gonna get back online here, folks. So, we're gonna pull up the online agenda so that I can make sure that I have the people on the paper and the people online. Thank you for pointing that out. So, this is 11.4 online. And it is the removal of properties from the Township Municipal Heritage Properties Register. And the motion comes forward from Councillor Jameson, seconded by Councillor Maybe, that council receive, oh, that one's already passed. Just didn't write it. My apologies. Moved by Deputy Mayor Fode, seconded by Councillor Jameson, that council support the recommendation from the Municipal Heritage Committee to amend the Municipal Heritage Properties Register, and that the properties at 4520 County Road 2 and 14 Ivy Drive be removed from the Municipal Heritage Register. Discussion on the motion? I see no hands up, so I will call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? And we're carried. Next item is 11.5, and that is the RFP ADM 2024-002 Indigenous Land Acknowledgement. Moved by Councillor Maybe, seconded by Councillor Jameson, that the council award proposal RFP ADM 2024-002 Indigenous Land Acknowledgement, Communication and Consultation Policy and Training Services to Arcadis Professional Services Canada, Inc. at a total value of $39,630.80. Discussion on the motion. Go ahead, Councillor Lackey, and then Councillor Cummin.
Thank you, Your Worship. I see we have the ranking, but we don't have the bids. Is there a reason for that?
Do you want to take a stab at that?
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. There's concern of commercial confidentiality on the unsuccessful bidders, that providing their bid prices would prejudice them competitively. So we've decided to take the position of, we will show the rankings, and the successful bidder, of course, their pricing is provided because we have to provide that anyway. But for the unsuccessful bidders, we want to preserve their confidentiality. Pricing is a sensitive issue, particularly if you're looking at an hourly kind of job. In this case, we were looking for a fixed price. But yes, so that's long way of saying we want to keep the bid prices confidential for the unsuccessful bidders.
So just to follow up, would that not have to come to council, or I mean, this seems to be kind of abrupt and
So-
because I mean, that's the way it's always been. We get to see the pricing, and so does everybody else. So we know what we're dealing with.
Madam Clerk?
Through Your Worship, just to provide some clarification. So when we did award the RFP for our CIP, we did rank the proponents as well. So similarly done in this report. And just back to your other comment, this was part of the 2024 budget that council approved back in December 2023, or sorry, January 2024.
Yeah. I will just add to the comments made by the clerk and by the CAO. I went to the CAO first because it's more of a general nature comment rather than specific. So thank you both for bookending that. It has been made, I have been made aware at county, and it is starting to trickle down into our lower municipalities, and you are not the only council member to be displeased with the way that it's being reported. This started to happen at the county council table, unrelated to this motion, but just so for clarification. They stopped providing ranking of the amounts. They actually didn't even put who the other bidders in at the county. However, and the reason that is that the gentleman who is the aficionado in regards to procurement, who's from Ottawa, Eli, was a lawyer. He gave a whole dissertation, if you will, to the county council, basically saying that there is more and more litigious things happening in regards to this arena, as far as people being upset about sharing essentially their trade secrets on how they price is how it goes. It is not, it's being done, I think, more so as a precaution right at the moment until we get a final word on it. But it's being challenged by courts on a number of different levels. Not anything to do with us at this municipality. However, it is starting to rear its ugly head. Go ahead, Councillor Lackey.
Well, no, it's just a matter of transparency. I mean, these people are dealing with a municipality who has to be open and transparent. So I have no sympathy for them. If they're trying to hide something, sucks to be you. I want to see these prices because it's not always the lowest that bidder that gets them. We know that. That's why we have the ranking system, but we need to see those. I think everybody needs to see what we're dealing with and who we're dealing with.
Perhaps it might be of benefit that the CAO bring back a report in regards to what's going on at the county, and because I know it's part of the CAO meetings. And again, we're sort of off topic from this motion, but I think it speaks to how we might have to do things in the future. For the record, I'm not particularly pleased with it either. I like to see what I remember very specifically during our discussions about the fire hall, seeing all the different bidders, seeing it going from this to this, and having the depth of information to really understand it. But I think it begs further comment and question from a well-versed lawyer. So go back to the motion at hand. This is in regards to Indigenous land acknowledgement, communication and consultation policy and training services. So Councillor Kelman.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you to the clerk. Regarding the subject matter of this specific motion, looking at the companies, I did a quick look at some of them. So the one that's being recommended, Arcadis, is that an Indigenous owned and run company?
Through Your Worship, it is not. But the Indigenous Relations team, there are 2 members who are Indigenous members and one that is non-Indigenous. I would also like to note that all of these members have, significant lived experience when it comes to Indigenous histories. They have professional accreditation, contemporary points of view, and of course, governance structures as well.
Thank you. Follow up.
Go ahead.
I'm not arguing with the ranking system. I just note Creative Fire that ranked second is 100% Indigenous owned and run, as is the Indigenous and Community Engagement Incorporated. Ridge Road Training is based partly out of Tyendinaga, which is quite close by. So the ranking system is sort of inflexible given the subject matter. And I just think that in this instance, that perhaps that's something that should have been given a little bit more weight. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Deputy Mayor Fody.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. A culmination of comments from both Councillor Lackey and Councillor Kelman as to how this shows to us we're losing our transparency by not being transparent to the public. Councillor Lackey's absolutely bang on this. There's a real good way for people who don't want their numbers to be shown, don't bid. I know companies right here in this township that don't bid for that very reason. They don't want to share how they come and arrive at their numbers that they have. So for us to be transparent here at this table, we have to be working with other people that are willing to be transparent. And I'm sorry, I'm fully on board with Councillor Lackey. If you don't want to be transparent, just withhold your bid, or we can do it for you.
Okay, we'll have more discussion on that at a later date. Any further comments in regard to the motion at hand? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? And it is carried. Next item, Recreation Group, Working Group Terms of Reference, moved by Councillor Gorell, seconded by Councillor Kelman. The council approved the Recreation Working Group Terms of Reference as attached to Administration 2024-008. That council appoint Councillor Kelman, Councillor Lackey as council representatives to the Recreation Working Group. Discussion on the motion. Go ahead, Councillor Jameson.
I'm just not quite sure where the arena discussion fits into this, if it does at all. If it does, fine. If it doesn't, why not?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you. Recognizing that council is expecting me to bring a report on the arena in June. I don't think there is time for the working group, the rec working group, to be able to contribute to that. I have all the pieces to the puzzle for the arena working group report. I just need to sit down and write it and consult with Director Holiday, the Director Renier, our colleagues in GAN. Ultimately, if council decides to continue to participate in the arena, the working group will have input at that point. But I think the first main hurdle is getting past the June report.
So because it's not part of it now, because depending on the outcome of the June meeting, it would be added at that time.
Just follow up on that. I appreciate CAO's comments. I understand the process more or less. But so you're going to present a report with respect to the arena. Are we going to be expected to make a decision on that report in June?
Mhm.
Okay. So this is kind of where I'm trying to get to with the analysis or with the mandate of the recreation working group, which seems to be mandated to look at the more global aspects of recreation in the township. It seems to me that at the point at which we have a report from the CAO, which I'm sure will be thorough, et cetera, that at that point, would we have the opportunity to move this to the recreation working group so that it can be considered in the context of other things we might want to be doing or should be doing or are doing in the township for the benefit of all of our community? Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. I think that's a fine idea. I think for the working group to do what it needs to do with respect to the arena, we first need to decide what's the direction that the township is going to take with respect to the arena. But once we get that clarity, then the working group under its mandate would fit with programming out of the arena and providing comments and guidance on the arena. So I see it as a natural fit.
So it's already worked into the general overview and recreation in general. It would be included either way. Even if we were to decide to not support it at all, then it would still have to be considered as it's part of the recreation in the area, and how that, because there's been suggestions that instead of funding it at all, we'd fund it per person like we do with other municipalities, and that would be considered as part of the discussions of that group that time. So it just depends on how the discussion in June goes.
And just finally, and I'll leave it there. I just am concerned that we are not finding ourselves committed to an action with respect to the arena that's outside of the broader consideration of recreation going into the 2025 budget process. So when you say that the direction comes, recommendations on the direction come in June, that makes me think we're going to be committed to a path.
There's three options that are coming in June to be considered. I believe that's your goal. Well, it's not just are we in or we out. There's different paths, I think.
There's nuances.
Nuances. That's a better way of putting it. So all things considered, the CAO has been part of the working group that we've been working with GAN on this. And so he's been extremely thorough in trying to figure out what potential paths there are, and they will be presented to us in June for consideration, and then we can pick our path at that time. Okay, so this is terms of reference for recreation working group. Any further comments or questions in regards to that? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? And it's carried. Okay, next item is Councillor Fody outdoor court fees for 2024 season, moved by Deputy Mayor Fody, seconded by Councillor Gorell, that staff be directed to bring forward a report outlining the options for outdoor court fees for the 2024 season for council's consideration at a future meeting of the Committee of the Whole. Discussion on the motion. Go ahead, Councillor
I
Gorell.
believe that when we build this new storage tank, it seemed quite large. We should potentially put a pickleball court up on the top of the new water storage.
Anyhow, we'll move forward with the motion at hand, which is to outline options. To go ahead, Councillor Jameson.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm reading this and I'm seeing options for outdoor court fees. And maybe I didn't hear him. I'm having a lot of trouble with my hearing. We don't have fees to play. We have fees to reserve.
Correct.
There's a very big difference there. And I think from my point of view,
Should have reservation fees. The
yes,
word
because
reservation.
anybody can show up, even me, and try to play pickleball. I'll invite everybody out for that. But the point is that it's free for everybody. They just have to show up and play. And I know I've had a lot of feedback on that in Sealy's Bay, because we have both tennis and basketball, as well as I believe we're putting lines down for pickleball. So the point there is people are saying to me, well, why do we need a reservation system? We just show up. Somebody's there, we talk about when they're going to leave. It's kind of that neighborly thing we can do. So it is not about court fees, it's about reservation system. And I guess instead of sending the staff back to do a whole big study on the thing, I frankly think that it is not unreasonable to expect people to pay a very small amount of money, really, for a reservation, as it already exists in the budget that we've already passed. Unless we want to decide, because of all the construction and everything else, to just simply suspend the reservation system for 2024 until, once again, the Recreation Committee and so on and so forth has a chance to go for the big picture, which I'd really like to see, that overarching approach to recreation that includes all these moving parts so that people, young and old, will feel welcome. So I understand why this is on the table, but I really think we're just prolonging something we don't need to prolong. So I would suggest, I would vote against this, so it would be business as usual. You want to play, you reserve and you pay. Otherwise, I would suggest that we consider suspending the reservation system this year in light of the construction and everything else, and carry on from there. Thank you.
So that's the whole point of the motion, is to, unless you defeat it, but sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I think the pickleball group has no problem with the reservation side of things. In fact, I would expect them to argue that they like being able to reserve the courts exclusively for their use. They just don't want to have to pay the fee. So suspending the reservation system means the pickleball group does not get dibs on any courts. It's if they're free, they can use them. If they can't, but they want the surety that they have the courts booked for whatever times it is that they're booking.
So the way the motion is written, the staff be directed to bring forward a report outlining the options for outdoor court. I've added the word reservation. Deputy Mayor Fody and Councillor Gorell, are you okay to say it? I've added the word reservation fees for the 2024 to the suggestion, based on the suggestion from Mr. Jameson. Are you okay with that, Councillor Gorell? Because the fees only apply when you're reserving the court. So the word is actually pretty germane to the discussion. It isn't because we're charging people to use it whenever they show up. It's only to
Okay.
reserve.
Understood. And we're still bringing options for.
Correct.
Very good. Thank
So
you.
the motion that's on here is that their outdoor court reservation fees for the 2024 season of council's consideration at a future committee of the whole meeting. And the reason is I think there's some other information that really doesn't pertain to this motion that should be discussed as to the amount of time, effort, energy goes into this reservation system, as well as what amount of money comes out of it. You know, I think that we need to, based on this, it gives the staff to an opportunity to bring forward the nuances. Sorry, I'm not picking, it's been used a lot tonight. The ask was to waive the fees altogether, but I think council needs to have the information to know what that means if we're waiving it for this year. Sorry, well, and what
No,
that,
I agree with everything you're saying. I'll support the motion. I just get the feeling somebody wants something for nothing.
well, that'll be up to the staff members to bring forward the something for nothing option. So yeah, so yes, we're all gonna buy Mark a pickleball paddle. Sorry, Councillor Kalman, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. I don't know if there are restrictions, as the CAO was saying, there was a significant amount of time indicated by the delegation last week that they wanted to reserve the courts for. And I don't know if we restrict that. They said themselves it's a growing sport, particularly with young people. I don't think they have a lot of young people as part of their group. So it just seemed to book it for 6 mornings a week throughout the entire season seemed excessive to me. So I don't know if that's something that could be included in the report or if there is already a restriction in place for how much you can
Director Holliday
reserve.
can take that into consideration when writing said report.
That would be great. Thank you.
Okay. Anyhow, any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? As carried. To nuances, yes. So next item is Councillor Lackey's amend parking bylaw for township special events. Motion comes forward from Councillor Lackey, seconded by Councillor Kalman, that staff be directed to amend bylaw number 23-064, parking bylaw to include parking sign slip covers for special events in the township. Discussion on this motion. Okay, I'm gonna call a question on it. All those in favor? All those opposed? Carried. It will give us some leniency during special events, and we can put those bags over the signs where it's appropriate, where it does not impede traffic flow. Anyhow, next item is Councillor Kalman, regulate the use of public docks in the township recommendation. So the motion comes forward from Councillor Kalman, seconded by Councillor Gorell. Whereas access to public docks owned by the township of Leeds in the Thousand Islands Township is provided to the public at large, and this access has been interfered with by persons leaving boats and materials at public docks in a manner which obstructs public use. Now, therefore, be it resolved that staff be directed to create a bylaw to regulate the use of public docks in the township, and further that the bylaw be included and enforced through the Administrative Monetary Penalty System, AMPS bylaw. Discussion on the motion. Go ahead, Councillor Lackey.
I'd be supporting this motion for the simple fact that we do have a lot of everywhere. That there's a municipally owned waterfront tends to get abused and abused by contractors, by other people who literally leave their things there for more than hours, sometimes more than days. So I'm definitely in favor of this motion.
Okay, so motion still remains on the table. Any further discussion? Okay, call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? And it's carried. And to the point that Councillor Lackey just made, this is starting to get tired. This is a problem that persists in all of our spots. It happens in Lyndhurst, it happens in Sealy's Bay, it happens in Ivy Lee and Rockport. So to that. Next item is mayor's update. We're in the process of refreshing our website. As part of the initiative, we kindly ask for a few moments of your time to complete a brief exercise on the website. Your feedback will be valuable in assisting us with the refresh process. This is very important if we want the website to be more user-friendly, so please provide your feedback. May long weekend is quickly approaching. Make sure to check out our 7-day use parks and splash pad that are scheduled to open on May 17th. So shout out to all of our public works people who are working their tails off to get that ready. We know it's a big ask, and that makes a big difference when it comes to welcoming people to our public spaces. National Public Works Week, TLTI, is our annual. We're going to be celebrating by having the Touch a Truck event on May 21st from 1 till 6 p.m. Make sure to bring a food item for donation, or cash donations will also be accepted in the absence of a food item. The Community Improvement Plan spring intake is still open. Please contact our Planning and Development Department to arrange a time to review your proposed project and discuss specific application requirements. Applications are due on May 31st. Are you looking to upgrade your private lane to your cottage or to your year-round home? The application deadline for eligible road associations is June the 2nd. There are a few things I'd like to bring up. June 1st, Red Canoe Fest is happening in Sealy's Bay, but prior to the beginning of Red Canoe Fest, there will be a grand opening celebration at the rear of Leeds and Lansdowne Food Bank, which unfortunately gets used a lot, as do all food banks in the area. And we're just grateful that the volunteers in the community and the people who've worked really hard, along with some help from staff to get some grants, will see this new food bank space be open in Sealy's Bay. So 10:30 and Sealy's Bay for the grand opening, and then afterwards is Red Canoe Fest. Just a reminder to all high school students graduating this year, you have to have 40 hours volunteer hours. I know this because my son is graduating this year because he's going to have his volunteer hours in. There are lots of great local groups. Don't wait till your grade 12 year. Make sure that you look at opportunities to volunteer, whether it be at Turkey Fair, the Lansdowne Ag Society's annual fair, the plant sale for LAFR, Sealy's Bay Area Residents Association. There's unlimited opportunities for young people to get involved and to help their community. I've been asked to speak to a grade 2-3 class on Thursday about water conservation. There's going to be some air conservation in there as well, but I'm more on the water side. So I'm really looking forward to that opportunity. Little minds ask really big questions, and it's kind of fun. I also wanted to bring up that apologies to the public, that our annual audit, which usually we see here at this council table, has not been completed, not to the fault of our treasurer or our auditor, but there's the ARO, asset retirement obligations, changes that were coming down from the province have delayed it and sort of pushed it back. So we will see our audit in July, likely. That is the goal. That is the hope to see it. And I've had a bit of a sneak peek on what we think is going to happen. It's really exciting. No, I'm not saying how much it's going to be. My hope is that if everything goes according to plan, we'll have some great news for the public in regards to how things are managed here in the township. That is the goal. Don't worry, I'm not going to spoil your surprise, Mr. Treasurer. I wouldn't do that. And that is all I have on my mayor's update. Are there any announcements? Go ahead, Councillor Randy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you, on May 25th in Gananoque, we'll be going to the dogs. Dog Walking for Lions. This is in support of the service dogs that they provide to our communities around the province. And I did get some information, and I can't remember the number, but there are a good number of dogs being put out to the community in this current year. So May 25th, the town of Gananoque, and the walk goes to Pet Value. So look out for any other advertisements that are coming your way on that. And good to see anybody there, as I have the opportunity of walking and yelling and emceeing that little event for them. So should be good. Thanks.
Any other? Go ahead, Councillor Kalman, and then Councillor Groh.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just as you noted, this Saturday, there is the giant plant sale here in Lansdowne, the Laffer plant sale. They have over 3,000 plants potted, ready to go. There's also a lot happening in Sealy's Bay and Lyndhurst. There's plant sales and bake sales and yard sales. And also the following weekend on May 25th is Leeds Heritage Day. So there is some things, quite a few sites listed online, including our archives, that are going to be sort of having their doors open that day and hosting the public. Thank you.
Okay, and Councillor Grell, go ahead.
I was made aware recently that the annual bike rally in support of AIDS will be happening August 4th to 9th. So some very serious riders go from Toronto to Montreal over a period of time, and they will be stopping at the Rockport Barn on the 7th. And the reason I bring this up quite early is A, we don't meet in August, and B, pre-registration is a good thing for this well-deserved cause. And there's a website, bikerally.org, ... I just wanted to get it into our
Calendars.
township update earlier than later. Once again, because of pre-registration and people planning whatever they want to plan. You can do the entire deal. You can ride 600 kilometers, 300 kilometers, or 100 kilometers, and it's all good causes. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got it. Thank you. So just as an aside, the AIDS ride, I have had the pleasure of meeting them in Gananoque. They've often stopped there. So I'm super excited that they're in our township at the Rockport Barn. That'll be a lovely stop for them. And great that it's in our township. I'm not sure if they're still stopping in Gan, but I would happily see them in Rockport. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Foley.
Thank you, Your Worship. On the vein of cyclists, I was able to take a few minutes to take in the ending of the Lansdowne cycle rally this past Saturday. They had approximately 150 riders. It was interesting to see the numbers had gone up a bit. I did query the one man who volunteers there where they had stayed the night before, and they stayed in Gatineau. So the man organizing it said he would feed back to myself. I gave him an email address, the council email address. He's going to feed back the tally of the winners and so on. And he said, if you so wish, you can feed it to the local press. I would also like to feed that to Tanya Hammond to engage with them, to invite them to stay in our municipality. If they're going to enjoy our road, maybe they could enjoy our hospitality while they're here as well. And for 150 people on the course, there's likely 200 to 225 minimum that are kind of the group entourage, so to speak. So they could have a little impact here as well.
Absolutely.
Anyway, they had the great weather, of course, and the OPP had no incidents other than they had to smile at the surprise looks on people when there was two cruisers sitting at the interchange of Eden Grove Road and Kais Road. And but no incidents did take place.
Thank you. Any other announcements? Seeing none, we'll move on to bylaws. Moved by Councillor Lackey, seconded by Councillor Kelman, that 3 readings and final passage be granted to bylaws number 24-017, 24-022, and 24-024, which is the Beaver Road bylaw. That was added to that motion. And that 3 readings and final passage be granted to bylaw number 24-023, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the corporation, the Township of Leeds and the Thousand Islands at its May 6, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting and the May 13th, 2024 Council meeting. Discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? And we're carried. And the next motion is a motion to adjourn, moved by Councillor Lackey, seconded by Councillor Kelman, that council adjourn. All those in favor? All those opposed? And we're carried. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.